Good afternoon, everyone. This is Andrew Schmidt from the Secretariat of the 10YFP. I want to welcome everyone to this webinar on Sustainable Public Procurement. This is part of a larger webinar series which takes exchanges between national focal points of the 10YFP and the different One Planet programs to discuss different topics, things that have been learned from different projects and initiatives, and to better understand what the country's priorities are and needs for SCP. As I said, this is going to be focusing on the Sustainable Public Procurement Program of the One Planet Network, whose vision statement envisions a world in which environmental, economic, and social aspects of sustainability are embedded in public procurement policies, strategies, processes, and practices as a means for promoting efficiency, value for public spending, good governance, and integrity in public procurement. I am not going to take much more of your time. I just wanted to very quickly a couple of technical things. You'll notice that your microphones are all muted. If you would like to intervene, you can use there should be a question and chat box that you can use, and we'll try to get those together and ask those questions then or comments to the panelists. There should also be a little hand raising button. If you click to raise your hand, then someone here should see that, and we will try to then give the floor to you. So with that, let's look at the agenda for today. We are pleased to have 3 speakers with us from the Sustainable Public Procurement Program. And first, to give an overview of the Sustainable Public Procurement Program, I would like to introduce Mr. Philip Tepper, who works with ICLE. ICLE is one of the co-lead organizations of this program. So without further ado, Philip, over to you, and I'll just put your presentation up here for everyone to see.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and a warm welcome from my side to all you in listen-only mode. I hope you enjoy this webinar with us, and I will briefly introduce you the program we are running here together with a lot of people. So thanks to everyone contributing to One Planet Procure with Care so far. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this program is a global umbrella multi-stakeholder program, and we have different kind of organizations in there, from a small city to a broad United Nations type style organization. Everybody is there on board, and they share a common goal to accelerate the uptake and implementation of sustainable public procurement at local, national, regional, or global level and worldwide, to ensure also a significant contribution to sustainable consumption and production patterns in light of the SDGs, in particular SDG 12. We have more than 139 organizations, a couple are in the pipeline currently of joining, that joined in the past years and months. This is amazing, and it's a really good, solid basis for our joint work. We have them represented from more than 40 countries. And as introduced by Andrew, the program was led by 4 organizations: UN Environment Program, Environmental Development Center, CC of the Ministry of Ecology and Environment of China, Rijkswaterstaat, Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management from the Netherlands, and ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability. Next slide, please. So how do we work? A core institutional body of the program is a multi-stakeholder advisory committee. You see a list there who is currently on this turn to support the program development for the next years. It's a mix of ministries, cities, expert organizations, you name it there, and we work together to make this program a meaningful one. They have the role to act as advisors to provide necessary technical and strategic advice to the program, ensure also coherence of the work plan, for instance, that we have. They are encouraged to collaborate in projects, facilitate processes and activities. And we also have to see how this program is funded. So fundraising is an important element of this, and profiling and implementation of activities on the ground. In particular, the last point, we want to make this program a program that contributes a lot to actual change on the ground, that you can see that is tangible, say, meaningful outcomes of implementation of sustainable public procurement. We recently had a MAC meeting and had a great exchange also in light, of course, of the COVID-19 situation we are all facing. I hope you all stay healthy. And in light of this, we are also responding to the question, what is strategically to be changed in public procurement systems around the world to make it sustainable and resilient? Next slide, please. Here you can see the program objectives and work streams as developed throughout the years in a collaborative effort. We have 4 main streams there: support SPP implementation, stimulate change in international sectoral markets, advocate and mobilize political support and leadership, and demonstrating public value and measuring impacts and progress of SPP. And you will soon hear from those work streams what we are currently doing on there. Of course, it will be only a snapshot, but there are many other things that take place. For instance, in the support SPP implementation, we provide access to guidance, training, facilitate knowledge sharing, peer-to-peer collaboration, networking activities, but also technical assistance on the ground. Many of the organizations that are part of this program have experience or know others that have experience in those fields. So it's a very important, strong pillar of the program. The second one is a sectoral focus. We see that, of course, commodities and public procurement is split around sectors very often. So we try to respond also to sectors that are globally relevant, such as ICT, health, construction, food, and others to be defined. And all these points 3 and 4 in the slide, you see more the tools and measures that we want to use to fulfill our goals and objectives. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot on where we stand in 4 of our interest groups. That's 4 very active ones. One in the health sector. They currently support capacity building in developing countries. They work on an SP index on health, and they contribute to a sharing platform there. This is just changing continuously now, of course, with the situation, and so it's only a snapshot there. The second one is on information communication technology, on electronics, and this one is establishing a global platform for exchange and collaboration called Arctic. It's an alliance for responsible, circular, and transparent procurement, and there are different actors involved in the design, policy, and value chain do come together and work on topics relevant to get ICT out of a niche to a certain way when it comes to sustainable development. Third one on construction, important of course, because it has a huge impact on environment, but also on social issues around the world. This working group, interest group, works very diversely and in cooperation also with other programs, namely, of course, on buildings and construction. The fourth one is SPP monitoring, and I won't say too much about it because Faryaka will talk about it in depth later. But there's, of course, the important aspect that we need to know what we are talking about, what the impact is, what are the outstanding issues, where do we want to focus more in the future. This interest group is supporting with data and outcomes in this regard. Next slide, please. I would like to encourage you to go to the website you will see soon and take a look at our program principles and the strategy, because this can outline a bit more in depth what we are doing, what we want to achieve, and it's all publicly available there on the website. I would like to, next slide please, encourage you to visit this website, follow us on Twitter, and with any further ado, I would like to wish us all a great webinar and hand over to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Philip. I think that was very interesting and great for an introduction to this webinar, particularly talking about the different sectors that you work with that are as globally relevant as possible. Obviously, health, I don't need to say anymore, ICT and construction, and in the food sector, who will be having someone from the panel today speak with. But first, as you were alluding to, Farid Yaker from UNEP, who also co-leads this program, is going to give a little bit more information on the 12.7.1 methodology and next steps. I don't see any questions at this point, so I think that I'm going to hand things over to Farid. Farid, if you just give me one moment, I will give you the screen sharing, and over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you very much, Philip, for the introduction. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see me, Andrew? Can you see the screen?
Yep, I can see it. Not in the full screen mode, but in.
It's going to come in full screen mode hopefully soon. Voila. Is it fine?
Perfect.
Okay. So as Philip said, we are in UNEP. I'm Farid Yaker first, speaking from Paris, working for UNEP and in charge of Sustainable Public Procurement. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining this webinar. I am going to present you the progress we achieved on SDG indicator 12.7.1, and this activity is integrated in what Philip mentioned, the work area on monitoring SPP. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the SDGs. So SPP is located quite logically in the goal 12, responsible consumption and production. And here we have a specific target. One of the 169 targets of the SDGs is on sustainable public procurement. And it says, promote public procurement practices that are sustainable in accordance with national policies and priorities. And for all targets, we try to define indicators. So the indicator for this target reads, number of countries implementing sustainable public procurement policies and action plans. So here for you, I would like to pose, to analyze a little bit the indicator. We say number of countries, so we're going to measure the countries, how many countries are implementing sustainable public procurement policies and action plans. But this means that we're talking about implementation. So first, they have to have a sustainable public procurement policy and action plan. That's the first condition. And second, it needs to be implemented. And that's very important to understand how we structured the index. So I will present the way we developed the SDG 12.7.1 index, UNEP and our partners. I will present you the index itself and then talk about next steps. You can find on the One Planet Network Knowledge Hub the guidelines of the index, so with a much more in-depth description of the index and how it was developed, for those of you who want to have more details. So, since the index really targets 12.7.1, the idea is to measure the level of implementation of sustainable public procurement in a single country. And we cover 8 sub-themes, which are assessing, as I said, first of all, the existence of SPP policies and or SPP legislation. 2, the efforts and means that are dedicated by countries towards the implementation of SPP policies. This is for us an indication of commitment. So we call that a process indicator or sub-indicator in this case. Then the outputs that are developed through these policies, and then the results achieved by these policies, which we call outcome indicators. The methodology applies a progressive approach to allow countries to consider certain options, such as the inclusion of the sub-national level in the calculation. We're talking about sustainable public procurement, so this means central government, local authorities. In federal countries, we take into account states or provinces, as in the case of Canada, and we may also in the future take into account public enterprises, which are also part of public procurement. In some cases, for example, hospitals are outside the calculation of central governments, and health is an important component. So the idea is really to try to measure as much as possible of the public procurement. Then we also make sure that we can use it in countries who are not yet able to measure outcome indicators, the impact SPP has on sustainable development. And we know that many countries, the majority of still don't measure this indicator. And then finally, countries, of course, will need to provide evidence for the sub-indicators in terms of policy development, procurement guidelines, policy document guidelines, inclusiveness of sustainability criteria, legislation, trainings, contacts, etc. So we developed with our partners the index over 2 years. First of all, UNEP drafted an initial version of the index. Then it was revised and improved through consultations with the partners of the One Planet program, as well as with national SPP focal points and experts. We mobilized 52 experts from 40 countries who provided feedback on the methodology. Then we went into pilot testing from June to September 2019 with 23 voluntary countries or provinces, and 16 of which completed the whole process, and you can see them on the screen here. So now moving to the index itself. The index was approved by the Interagency Expert Group in February 2020 in New York. I will explain what it means a little bit later. And it's a composite index which includes sub-indicators. Then we have 3 options for the countries. As I said earlier, they can consider only the federal or national government level. They can consider regional or local governments, sub-national level, or they can consider them both. So in the first case, we will only calculate the sustainable public procurement efforts at the national government. Second case, at the local government level. And in the third case, we will add up the scores of the federal and, the national and the subnational levels. What does it mean? I mean, how can we define the various sub-indicators? Little p is only used in subnational case, and so option 2 and 3. And it corresponds to the percentage of the population living in the responding entities that are considered at subnational level. This makes sense, of course, to make sure that we give a value or we give an importance to sub-indicator 2 and 3, which is proportionate to, of course, the number of people who are concerned by these policies. If we have like the 5 major cities and they cover 70% of the population, it will give more weight than if it is only 1 major city. Then we have sub-indicator A, and sub-indicator A can take a value of 0 or 1, and it's related to the existence of an SPP action plan. We have B, which concerns regulatory framework. We have C, which is the support delivered to public procurement practitioners. We have D, which is about SPP purchasing criteria, buying standards, requirements which have been identified. E is about the existence of an SPP monitoring system, and F, the percentage of sustainable purchase of priority products and services. I will come back in more detail on those sub-indicators. So first of all, A, as I said, is about the existence of an SPP action plan or SPP regulatory requirements. This is very important here because, of course, the indicator is about number of countries that are implementing action plans or policy, but we found that many countries don't have specifically an action plan, but they have very strong regulatory requirements. And we should consider that they are implementing SPP because the law is there to make sure that SPP is on the right track. So we'll give a value of 0 if there's no plan or regulatory requirements, and then 1 if we found there is action plan policy and SPP regulatory requirements which have been developed by the government. So in this case, if countries have no action plan, the value will be 0, and this will mean that the whole formula of the index will be 0 because we have a multiplication, as you can see here. If we put a value to 0, then the whole S, the score, will be 0. It means that this country will be eliminated, will not comply with this indicator, which makes sense because they don't have already either regulatory requirements or an action plan which has been developed for this purpose. Then we move into B to F, which add up, as you can see here, B plus C plus D plus E plus F. The more you score, the more you add up items and score for these sub-indicators, the larger will be your total score. So B is about the legal framework. Is it conducive to sustainable public procurement or not? And here we have 2 parts. First of all, we look at, in general, the regulatory framework. We give 0.5 points, and we see if it's the legal framework makes it possible to practice sustainable public procurement, that it explicitly allows it, or that it makes sure that, for example, it is mandatory for certain categories of products. For example, in the European Union, we have directives that specify limits on vehicle exhaust emissions, or in many Asian countries, there is an obligation to procure sustainable alternatives from an official catalog of products, for example, list in China, or other countries which are directly linking the products to national eco-labels. Then the other half of the score will be on whether legal framework supports SPP practice, and we will look at the stages of the procurement cycle. You can find more details in the guidelines on the specific parameters or provisions that we consider in this part. Then about sub-indicator C, it's training and capacity building. And here we're going to look at the support which is given to the public procurement authorities in developing SPP, and in terms of support, whether there are guidelines and tools, where a website has been dedicated, best practices are being developed and shared, whether there's newsletter, help desk, and local networks of procurement practitioners are facilitated. Then D is about SPP purchasing criteria, buying standards, requirements that have been identified. And here we propose to look at a list of 20 product groups. And we need to see whether these criteria are periodically revised and updated. And we propose an initial list of products and services for reference. And countries are invited to see and to pick the closest products to the categories which are specified in the next slide. And they may add 2 more relevant categories which are not in the list. So we found out that these categories pretty much represent what countries, the types of products and services that countries prioritize when they start doing sustainable public procurement. So I'm not going to go into the details, but you get to see that we have 18 categories there, and then we have 2 blank categories. And for each category for which you develop criteria, then you get points. And the second part of D is whether there's consideration of social and economic issues. And then we look at whether procurement is used as a strategic instrument to deliver objectives in terms of social and economic dimensions. And countries can get up to 40 points for additional points. And here you have the details of the social and economic issues, social inclusion, decent work, etc., trade, of social and economic promotion of SMEs, development of poor areas, anti-corruption measures, but countries can add some of their own concerns there. And then we have an additional 0.2 points if the countries use a risk assessment method to identify which products and services show the highest potential environmental or social impact. Then we move into E, which is about the existence of a monitoring system. And here we want to assess whether public procurement is monitored and how it is monitored. So 0.7 points, which range from either partial monitoring or comprehensive monitoring, or sustainability outcomes are also being monitored. And here you get the highest score. And then do you use surveys, self-assessments, internal audits, or the traditional reporting, or you use an information system? You get more points, and you get the maximum points if you have included your SPP monitoring in any procurement platform. And the last sub-indicator is about the percentage of sustainable purchase. This is really what we want to measure, but many countries still don't have the capability to come up with this figure, so we need to consider also outputs and process indicators. So here we will look at the total value of the contracts that are used to buy the priority product groups, the groups for which SPP criteria have been developed, or standards or eco-labels have been recommended, of course, out of the overall spend for the same category. So I'm not going to go into the detail of the formula, but you can either write to me or you can look at the guidelines to better understand. Now moving into next step. As I told you, the indicator, the methodology was reclassified into tier 2. This means that now the interagency expert group, which is in charge of the validating the methodologies and reclassifying them, consider that the indicator is conceptually clear, that it has an internationally established methodology, but that are not regularly produced by countries, which is the case for SPP, obviously. In terms of next steps, where are we headed? First of all, we will revise the calculator, because what I showed you is connected to a calculator to facilitate the reporting. The countries will have to fill then the Excel sheet, and this will automatically calculate their score. So we had an initial Excel calculator, which was modified after we revised the methodology and we finalized it. Then we'll move into capacity building. So developing a training material, online course, to really help the SPP focal points understand how they should report. And then we're ready to go into the first exercise of collection of data from November to December 2020. Thank you very much, and I'm available for questions in case you have them. Thank you very much, and back to you, over to you, Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Farid, for the presentation. Very important work, very complex work, but although I don't necessarily understand the entire intricacies of the formula, I do see the importance of having so many different variables, as you were saying, in terms of being able to take into account the different contexts and the different approaches that countries have in terms of the level of impacts, outcomes, outputs that they're able to measure, and also whether at the federal level, the subnational level, etc. So as you said, for any more information on those next steps or more details that anyone on this webinar is free to be in touch with Farid directly. I don't see any questions right now. Again, please feel free to type any of the questions in if you want, and we'll try to get them together and come back to them at the end. We have one more speaker today, going back after the general introduction of the program and then the look at the indicators by Farid to look at one of the specific sectors that Philip was mentioning in the beginning, and that is food. And so I would like to welcome Ms. Luana Swenson, who works for the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, to present some of their work there. Luana, over to you, and you should be able to share your screen as well. Let me know if not.
Thank you. I will try to see. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, we can see the PowerPoint now. Yeah.
Okay, I put also my webcam.
Perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today presenting part of FAO work on sustainable food procurement with a focus on the African context. So let's see. Okay, FAO work on sustainable public procurement is an important area of work for FAO, especially in the last decade, and has been focusing especially on inclusive public procurement, meaning the linking public institution demand for food to unfavored or vulnerable suppliers category, such as local smallholder farmers, small and medium food enterprise, in order to advance social, economic, and also environmental development goals. We see also public food procurement as a very important entry point for driving more sustainable food systems and healthy diets. So this work currently is being developed mainly by the Nutrition and Food Systems Division at FAO. So, and one of key points for us of sustainable food procurement is that depending on the choice on what food to purchase, such as local, diverse, nutritionally, culturally adequate, and from whom you purchase, from local and smallholder farmers, from small and medium food enterprise, human, youth, and other vulnerable groups, and also from what type of production practices, from agricultural production that ensures environmental sustainability and biodiversity. Sustainable food, public food procurement holds the potential to impact both consumption and production patterns, and as we know, now we've been in discussion here, to advance social, economic, and environmental development goals. So, one key example of sustainable food procurement that FAO has been working, and I think not only FAO work, but is an important example, is what we call the homegrown school feeding. African Union, the NEPAD SCAD, this homegrown school feeding is defined as a school feeding program designed to link school feeding to agricultural development through the purchase and use of locally and domestically produced food. In this publication that you can see here from FAO, World Food Programme, the IFAD, NEPAD, the Global Child Nutrition Forum, and Partnership for Child Development, we joined together to have this resource framework on homegrown school feeding. We defined it as a school feeding program designed to provide children in schools with safe, diverse, and nutritious food sourced locally from smallholder. And one important characteristic of homegrown school feeding is that it's a very cross-cutting a powerful policy instrument in very low-income countries, but also in medium and high-income countries. We have examples from Africa, from Latin America, from European countries. Also now the new European Union Farm to Fork strategy, the US. So it's a kind of policy that can be used and adapted to very different contexts. Also, inclusive procurement and value chains is one of the key 4 pillars of FAO School Food and Nutrition Framework just launched last year. So we say that sustainable public food procurement is a kind of instrument that countries can use to support to achieve multiple benefits to a multiplicity of beneficiaries. I can see here food producers, the food consumers, and also the community. One example, when I have increased demand at school level, but also from hospitals and other kind of public institutions, university, social services, social institutions that provide food, when I have this stable and predictable demand, for instance, for more diversified nutritious food, I can trigger the production from the smallholder farmers of this kind of food that will also benefit and increase the consumption of this type of more nutritious local food by the children, that here is my target beneficiaries, but also we have many examples in country that this increased demand, increased production will also increase the availability of this type of products at community level, and also then the consumption of these products also at the community level. So I can target more nutritious food, but diversified food, but also we have country examples that I target, for instance, organic food, and I have this beneficiary circle depending on what food I want to purchase, choose to purchase, and also from whom. So in the FAO work and the other UN partners work on sustainable food procurement, there has been also measuring some types of impact. For instance, economic modeling applied to Ethiopia shows that for every $1 invested in homegrown school feed in local procurement brings an economic return of $7.2, including the value to the farmers, against the $3.1 for the regular school feeding when I buy food from imported food or for large traders. So this is different. Also, in a local economic wide impact evaluation, the LEWI of homegrown school feeding programs in Kenya, it has assessed that an increase of 10% of direct purchase from local farmers brings a 7% increase in the impact of the total real income of the program in the local community. This is a very interesting methodology that was implemented in Kenya, and that FAO is also, through a project that I'm mentioning, implementing it also in Ethiopia and in Senegal. And it's very interesting to see that if I add 10% of expended food basket, meaning not only as is traditionally in school feeding programs in Africa, to the beans, maize, oil, and salt, if I expanded the food basket, buying, for instance, vegetables, fruits, I can have a 38% increase in impact on the total real income for the local community, meaning not only the farmers, but how the money goes in the community. And if I add an increase in 10% in funding for the school food and nutrition and interventions to raise farmers' productivity, to support the farmers to respond to this demand, by 10%, I have a 917% of impact on the total real income. This, oops, sorry. Okay, no. Okay, and also a similar kind of impact that has been trying to be measured is a FAO Exact tool that also estimates that the carbon footprint of a school meal could drop from 0.03 to minus 0.15 in Kisumu, Kenya, and from 0.02 to minus 0.06 in Antananarivo, Madagascar, with purchase from improved agricultural production practice. So maintaining the same menu, just changing the type of production practice that I want to purchase, you could also have a very significant environmental outcome. So FAO has been working through different projects on sustainable public food procurement in Africa, also in Latin America and other countries, but I focus here in Africa. One example is the Purchase from Africans for Africa that was implemented by FAO in partnership with WFP in 5 African countries, Ethiopia, Malawi, Mozambique, Niger, and Senegal, that ended a couple of years ago. And this new policy support on public food procurement for government-led homegrown school food initiatives that are currently being implemented in Ethiopia and Senegal. And one quite very interesting thing that we could see also to this project and work is still there is a kind of lack of linkage of the debate and the policies on food procurement with the broader sustainable public procurement agenda. What we could notice, for instance, is when I talk about school feeding initiatives or homegrown school feeding initiatives, the main institutions involved is Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Social Protection in some cases. And these policies are mainly developed without taking in consideration or without really creating a dialogue, a synergy with this broader sustainable public procurement agenda in the country. And a lot of times without even talking and discussing with the public procurement authority. And this, for instance, was the case of Senegal, in which we have been working. They have developing a new policy for school feeding programs, which had the aim to link the demand for the schools with the local agricultural productions, also with diversification of menu. And it has been expressed to us that one key challenges was the public procurement rules and practice. In Senegal, but in many countries, what we see, the request from the government say, we have the policy on the school feeding, we want to link it with the local agricultural production, but the public procurement rules and practice is one important bottleneck for the policy implementation. So through this project, we did a consultation workshop with Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Education, Social Protection, and also Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. And we did also a legal assessment that on the public procurement policies, legislation, regulation, what were all the rules and the practice related to public procurement that were more could be used for food procurement. And we saw exactly this lack of dialogue. We could see that in this, for instance, in this workshop, it was practically the first time that the representatives of Ministry of Agriculture and Education involved in the school feeding programs were talking with the representative of public procurement authorities. And in the assessment that we did, we could see that despite this really challenge they were facing implementing the policy regarding the standard public open bid procedures or other tools, standard rules for public procurement systems, there were various legal instruments that, although not targeting farmers or their organizations, could be used for this type of suppliers and could be used for food procurement, for sustainable food procurement. So again, as was mentioned by Said, the very importance of guidelines and training of implementers on how to be more aware of these instruments that were mainly voluntary instruments. There was the standard rules, but there were a lot of options to be used that the implementers, the public entities were not aware sometimes of this or how to use it to for this specific sustainable procurement. And what we did was a letter of agreement with the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority in Senegal for them to develop exactly a guidelines for the public food procurement entities on how to use these available instruments to link the program to the local smallholder agriculture production, and also to provide training for the implementers. And what we have been seeing also in this work, and in Senegal, but especially in Ethiopia, for instance, is that many countries have instruments targeting the access of small and medium enterprises to public procurement opportunities. And this is very now also in the European Union. You have all these instruments, you have a lot of studies. But in the case of food procurement, especially, we mainly target or individual farmers, but mainly farmers' organizations, cooperatives, associations. And this type of target beneficiaries, we could say, the suppliers, they may not fit under the definition of small and medium enterprises. And in many countries, especially in the African context, agriculture is a very relevant instrument, and this kind of producer are as vulnerable as small and medium enterprises, or even more, and would even bring the benefits and would benefit from the access to public procurement opportunity similar to small and medium enterprises. But while sometimes there is a debate and also legislative instruments for small and medium enterprise, they don't see farmers' organizations, cooperatives, associations. Mostly they don't fit under the definition of the enterprise and cannot benefit from these types of instruments. So I think it's very interesting to start to see and discuss also these challenges regarding these different types of beneficiaries. So what have been also our work as a FAO, following this experience as in Senegal, also seeing a little bit this gap, this connection of the school feeding, homegrown or school feeding policies, that end with the lack of dialogue with this broader SPP agenda. We have been developing some workshops, such as with this one with the African Union. It was the African Union Knowledge Sharing and Capacity Building Workshop on designing and implementing sustainable public food procurement programs for homegrown school meals. This one was in Addis Ababa in November with 16 countries, and exactly bringing together Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Education, or Social Protection, that are the ones generally involved in the design of the school feeding policies, together with public procurement authorities, entities that are more linked with the sustainable public procurement agenda, to talk together, to discuss together, and find solutions and development next steps together. So we had planning, we have planned 2 new knowledge sharing and capacity building workshops. One in Agra in Ghana and another one home in Italy. It was supposed to be done this first semester this year, but due to the COVID, we had to postpone it. And all this work is being developed in partnership with the African Union, with the World Food Programme, and also the International Training Center of the ILO. Also, this is the support of the project with the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation. So just to conclude, I say that public food procurement has great potential to achieve multiple benefits and beneficiaries. It's a relevant part of the sustainable public procurement agenda, but it's still very important to strengthen the linkage between the public food procurement and the sustainable public procurement debate. And important also in terms of legal regulatory instruments to think about also these discussions of the SMEs and farmers organization, meaning this I think these linkages are all linked together. So thank you very much. These are my email, also the email of our team leader, Florence Tartanac. If you have questions, would like to have more information of our work on this area, we'll be very glad to share with everyone. Thank you. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Luana. Thanks very much. Very, very interesting to hear about the work from a member of the program in the countries like this. And I think the homegrown school feeding program that you focused on for much of your presentation is a good example of how SPP can really kind of move a market, not just environmentally, but also with socially, economically. So thanks a lot for that. And thanks to Philip and Farid as well, to our whole panel for the presentations. We have some time left here, so I would propose that we have a bit of a discussion. If there are questions or comments that anyone has, please, if you'd like to take the floor, just click the little hand button and we'll open the floor to you. Otherwise, there are questions, the question box. Sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen again here. There's the question box, and we'll try to get to those. I'm going to start out. It looks like there is a question right now. I think this would be for Farid. Felix Lam asks, will there be any target set after collecting the results of the index? Farid, I'm not sure if you have any information on that at this point.
I'm not clear with the question. Target in terms of countries, number of countries, or
maybe I will. Felix, if you're still on the line, if I can maybe find you in the list. Yeah, I think I might just have to unmute your microphone here. Felix, I think you are self-muted now. If you want to unmute your microphone and just specify a bit more what you meant for that question. His microphone hasn't been working, but he said country. Will there be any targets set after collecting results of the index? Okay, so you're asking at what level? So in the country? I'm not sure if that clarifies it more for you.
Well, we'll then for all the mainly leading countries, actually countries which have an action plan or regulatory requirements, we will calculate the score. If the score is above 5 points, then they will be considered to be implementing their policies. If it's below, then they won't be compliant. This is explained in the guidelines. So depending on how many countries will be above 5, then this will give us the score of the indicator, the number of countries which are implementing their plans. Okay. So again, we will circulate the call for collection of data to all the focal points. We have identified so far in 55 countries the persons which are in charge of implementing or at least monitoring the SPP policies. They will be asked to then fill in the Excel form. Based on that, we'll calculate the score of the country. If the score of the country is above 5 out of 10, then they will be considered as implementing the policies. They will be then compliant, and we'll calculate the number of compliant countries, which will give us the value of the target, of the indicator, sorry.
Great, thanks, Farid and Felix. I hope that answers your question. Are there other questions or comments from anyone in the audience at this point? You can raise your hand or write a question. I don't see anything right now. Well, while you're thinking, I have a question. For Luana, regarding the homegrown school feeding program, which again, very interesting. And I was wondering, you had a slide that showed kind of the producers on one end, the community, consumers on the other end, and then obviously where the program is acting is kind of in that middle section of the value chain with the procurement. And when you're talking about the different criteria that exist to ensure fairness and inclusion, smallholder farmers and things like that, I'm just wondering a bit more, how does that get balanced out, let's say, with the need to procure lots of food, and there's obviously kind of some big players in the market who tend to kind of, I don't want to say monopolize, but do a lot of procurement comes from them with this issue of, you know, being as inclusive as possible, particularly with a program like that. So I'm just wondering how your initiative or other similar ones maybe deal with that.
Okay. Yes. What we have seen, first, you need a very strong commitment from the government to adopt a homegrown school feeding program, because it is more difficult, logistically more difficult, also for the schools, the management of the contracts, or sometimes even the cooking. So there is first a strong commitment from the government to go in the direction of this type of policies. No, and this comes a lot with this kind of seeing this as an investment. So measuring the impacts or the results you can have in the local agriculture development. For instance, you can, so this is one also in the environmental, but especially generally they see the governments that have been adopting this is mainly looking as a strong instrument to develop the local agriculture production. So, and then at second level, you also need a strong commitment also from the implementers. So it will depend on the level of decentralization. But if it is at regional level or is municipality level, because even to manage these contracts, even for the cookers, is more difficult for you to have one supplier that supplies you one product, another the other one, and also to cook these raw products, local products, instead of having one big supplier that will come and deliver all the products. One solution, instrument, more than solution, that is used is also to build on farmers organizations, on cooperatives, and also cooperative union that do this job of aggregating and then supplying to the school. So instead of having a lot of smaller suppliers or a smaller farmers organization, you have some bigger ones. In Ethiopia, for instance, it's cooperative unions, that you have this aggregation and the supply that facilitates this. But in Brazil, for instance, that is one key example of this kind of programs. The policy was very linked with other policies designed to support family farmers and family rural entrepreneurs. So there was this very strong. There is this instrument of farmers organizations, but they also accept even for individual farmers. But there was a lot of work to build this. Now we say that we need. It's not a simple. It's a very strong and has a lot of potential. This kind of policies. But you also need a lot of work to develop your supply, but also the demand and also, as we were talking here, also the policy and the regulatory frameworks. Over to you, Andrea. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Luana. I have another question. Oh, it's coming right back to you here, Luana, from my colleague at UN Environment Program, Clementine O'Connor, who asks, does the homegrown school feeding program have any linkages to school garden programs where school children learn to grow produce themselves?
Okay. Yes, and no, depends on the countries, on the context. But in some countries, for instance, I will give an example from Kenya. They have a school garden, but it was managed by the local communities. So the model, when I talk about homegrown school feeding, not necessarily you are talking about school gardens or not, but you can be coupled with that. And in some countries, like in Kenya, we have a project where there was the school garden, but managed by the local farmers organization, by the community, and had also an education aspect. So there was the technical assistance of the municipality that were helping the farmers, and on the other hand, also there was lessons with the students. But on the other hand, for FAO, school gardens are mainly should have for the students mainly an educational approach, because there was a lot of issues also as having a school gardens as child labor. No, can become one very burden for the students, also burden for the teachers. So the idea is to have school gardens mainly for educational purpose, but you can have, as in some countries, as this example in Kenya, you have the gardens in the school, but managed by the community, by the farmers of the community, with an agreement of the schools to supply the food. This works well, but not for the child and for the children to produce for the consumption at the schools. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Luana and Clementine. I hope that responded to your question. Looking through the list here, I don't see any more questions right now. We've got a couple minutes left. I don't know if Philip, since you went first and have now heard the other interventions and questions, I'm not sure if you have any reactions to any of that or any final words. You're not obligated to by any means. Or Fareed also, please feel free, and we'll see if any other questions come in. Other than that, we will be wrapping it up soon.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I was listening in, very attentive and interesting presentation contributions. I feel with this work, practical work shown, it's now exciting to see the outcomes, and also work on indicators gives you an entry point, for instance, to ask more questions and get more the stories behind why certain things, for instance, do not work as anticipated. So curious on any follow-up work on a more qualitative level. So that's more a question to you, Farid. Also, what would be next steps after basically the formal requirements? What if you would think big, what would be interesting to do? And to Luana also, I would have a quick question about the land use policies and if they would have been affected by the activities you have been doing, and if really the public procurement angle was a trigger for this. Because I see the huge potential of this basically would have an impact on like you mentioned, Brazil, the question on land use policies is a key issue that could be addressed by public procurement, maybe.
Thanks, Philip. So maybe go to Fareed first if you have a reaction to
yes, sure. Steps. Thank you, Philip, for this good question. Indeed, what 12.7.1 methodology only unveils part of the performance of the countries, and it's certain that we have more questions. We'll also learn a lot of things which will not be included in the indicator. In fact, here we're talking about the maturity curve, and what we see is that we have countries that are at the lowest part of the curve. We're starting, and then we have countries who haven't started yet, even lower, and then we have a whole range of situations from countries, but also local authorities, regions who have embarked on SPP, and have different results, different performance levels. So we're putting the threshold here, the cutoff line somewhere. We have to make a decision to divide between those that are considered to be performing well or well enough that we will deem compliant, and those that hopefully are on the path to SPP, and in the following years, in the coming years, will do better and better and could be considered compliant. So this work we're doing is only connected to 12.7.1, but it should be placed in the whole perspective of monitoring SPP as a whole to really see what is being done, what can be improved. As you said, more qualitative type of work to better assist countries. And for this, we have also other tools like the MAPS, the methodology for assessing procurement systems that was developed by OECD World Bank, and now they have a module on sustainable public procurement, very interesting. And this module is being tested. It was tested recently in Norway, and the result will be soon, I think, online, the report on this assessment. And we have other organizations. I'm sure ICLE also is monitoring also and has tools to monitor local authorities. And what we have to do is really make sure that we connect all these tools to really provide good frameworks to the countries and to the contracting authorities and local authorities to understand, do a gap analysis, understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and really where they can take corrective measures and improve their performance. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Farid. And I just received a message from Lena Diesing who says the MAPS Norway assessment is already online, so people can check that out already. Luana, did you? And Luana,
can you share the, sorry, maybe Lena can share the link here in the chat.
Yeah, I'll share it in the chat box with everybody here, or Lena can. Sorry, Luana, I'm going to jump just back over because I see a question from one of the participants just before we get to the final question that Philip asked for you. Another question for Farid. Since the SPP program is not mandatory, is there any implementation strategy through a system of incentives to make sure that the countries apply those of the program? What incentives are already existing?
Well, I think 12.71 is an incentive. The countries will need to check the box, I would say, and comply. So they will have to report on their targets, and they need to report also on 12.71. So hopefully this would be a good incentive to move on SPP. And then I think we have in many countries, it's becoming more and more mandatory to really procure sustainably, and mostly in Asia for the moment, but we're moving towards that even in Europe. And for some product groups in Europe, it's already mandatory, the vehicles, or in the terms of energy efficiency for buildings or electric appliances. We have some mandatory procurement there, which is foreseen for public authorities. So I think we also need to put pressures on governments and contracting authorities, and this can be done also through public interest advocates, NGOs. But we have also to understand that this can happen only if there is good collaboration between private and public sector, and that we make sure that the supply is available, that we don't harm the local industries, that we don't harm national industries through sustainable procurement, that when we implement sustainable procurement, we make sure also that we don't harm SMEs based in the countries. So this has to be conducted in, I would say, a smart way. And UNEP and other organizations of the program are here to support you in making sure that you develop it in the right way.
Great, thanks, thanks, Farid. I hope that answers your question, Florence. Sorry, I didn't say who asked the question. That was from Florence Dizerens. Luana, I think Philip had just asked a question. I don't know if you noted it down about land use and SPP. If not, we can ask Philip to repeat it, but maybe you already have it.
Yes, maybe I'm not sure if I got it all right. If Peter, you could repeat it, it would be helpful, please.
Sure, I can. The question was that land use policies are an important deciding factor whether such programs that you described can be implemented. Without any land, no agriculture. So basically they are an integral part. My question was, do you have any indication or proof that the public procurement schemes used there did have an impact on the broader land policy, land use issues in those countries.
Okay, thank you. Look, we have I know I don't work directly with that. We didn't have as a FAO done some measurements, but there is different studies, especially in Brazil, and from Wageningen, from Vivian Valencia. She has a very nice paper, and she has been collaborating with us in other projects that has been assessing that this kind of policies has had an impact of the land use. So what she measures that the demand for the organic products has not the demand in Brazil. You have a price premium for organic. You can pay even 30% more. The public procurement, public food procurement programs can pay even up to 30% more for organic products or agroecological products. And this stable market and this price premium has been measured to change the end use for more organic products, for more the diversification, for more diverse type of productions. So there is some data on that in Brazil. And there is also some data about that, especially on organic in Denmark, where they initially had a policy. They wanted to increase the production of organic products in the country. And for many years, they have the focus of their policy was more like on supporting the production, until they have, I think 2014, if I'm not wrong, they have coupled this support for the production policies with a very strong policies on public food procurement, focusing on organic. And they had achieved great results. It was not only for the school, but any kind of public food procurement, with a lot of instruments like certifications and also monitoring. It's a very, very nice experience. And they were able through these two policies coupled together to in the more than double the production and to achieve the target they had for the organic production in the country. So there is some very interesting data also on this sense. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Luana, and thank you again to everyone. I don't see any additional questions coming in right now. And according to my watch, it is 2:44 in the afternoon in this time zone. So we are 1 minute ahead of schedule, which is impeccable timing. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to our panelists. And we will be sharing the full recording of this webinar with everyone as soon as that has downloaded after we sign off here. So with that, from the Secretariat, again, thanks to everyone, to our panelists, and don't hesitate to be in touch with anyone who spoke today for more information. Take care.
Thank you, Andrew, for the moderation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you,
a lot, and Luana and Farid, and everybody listening in. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Girato, Mario.